In this lesson, we are going to go over the library browser. So if I activate the library browser, this is what we get. Now, we've used this a few times in the previous lessons. This lesson is dedicated to understanding it completely, meaning we're going to learn how to create our own folders, our own subfolders, as well as our own libraries. So let's open up the library browser and actually dissect what we see. On the left hand side, this is the tree navigator. The forest library is the folder you should have. This is the one that is shipped with Forest Pack. On the right hand side is a previews tab. So for example, if I open up the forest tab and then open up another folder and click on 2D, you obviously will be able to see what's inside that folder. These are thumbnails telling you what the actual scattered object is going to look like. If we look on the left hand side, we can see this blue book icon. This is to represent that it is a library. It's important to know that it's blue because this is the system folder or the system library that came with Forest Pack, which means we're restricted in actually editing this. If we look at the bottom, we've got a whole bunch of extra options over here. If you do not see any of these, we can click the options button. This will give you the ability to toggle it on and off. At the top, we got a couple of menus and then all of these buttons over here. So let's start off by understanding these buttons over here. This button over here and this button over here is to take you to the very next library that is within the folder. So for example, autumn leaves, I can scroll through them like this. It's a lot easier just to use your mouse and a lot quicker. If I click on presets and click on this button over here, this is going to jump one full folder, skipping all of the subfolders. So when you've created multiple folders over here, you can obviously just scroll through them using this button. Again, a lot easier just using your mouse. This is the save icon for when we create our own folder. This is the refresh button. So when we're creating anything outside of Forest Pack and we wanted to refresh inside the library, we click that button. This will change the displayed order for you. So if we go underneath, let's say flowers and grass, and click that button, you can see that it's changed it alphabetically. Next is the representing name, if you want the English name or the Latin name. So for example, we got Kane01, can change it to the Latin names. This does help if you only know the Latin name from a client. You can obviously search for it using that. The zoom in and zoom out is for the thumbnail, so you can just get a better idea of what it's going to look like. Lastly, we have the change preferences, which we'll dive into a little bit later. On the right hand side, we do have a filters tab. So for example, if I go underneath Forest Library and I want it only to show me anything with the word flower, I can press enter. What it's done is it's hidden everything else and will only see the models that have the word flower in. That's also great because it tells you how many are in total. So the brackets right over there is telling me that I've got 14 objects in total. Under 2D, I've got 2 objects with the word flower in. And if I click on flowers and grass, you can see the 2 items. Presets, I've got 12. I've got 9 here, 1 here, and 2 there. To clear it, I can simply click this button right over there, or highlight, press backspace, press enter. On the first tab, which is called File, you'll see that the first 2 are grayed out. We'll cover that a little bit later. Save, Preferences, and Close. So these obviously are the same as this button, which is Save, this which is Preferences. Edit, again, 2 are grayed out. We'll cover that. Properties will be the properties of the actual item. So for example, if I click on African Daisy, click on edit, click on properties, I get a properties tab, which is basically telling you all the information about this actual item. Next, we have view, so we can refresh. We just learned zoom in and out, which again is this button right over there. Okay, now that we know the interface, let's scroll to the bottom on duplicate material. When we are importing, we can either use the scene material, replace from library, or to ask. The 3D objects creation, we can merge it into the scene or create an XREF to the library. The materials detector will give you the option of what material you want to import it to. Automatic selector is good because obviously if your scene is in V-Ray, it will automatically do V-Ray, same as Corona and any other rendering engine. And finally, the render quality, V-Ray or mental, high or low, we'll keep it to high for now. So the first thing that we want to do is create our own folder, then subfolders, and obviously libraries. And the way to do that is as follows. Let's first go into change preferences, and over here, library paths. What we need to do is we actually need to tell Forest Pack where to look. So let's click the add button. Let us locate a folder that we want to create, so wherever on your hard drive. Really important to know, do not create anything new or custom in the root folder, meaning this folder right over there. So this folder over here is the standard folder that is used to install all of the presets, models, and items inside ForestPack. Do not create anything inside these folders over here, because when you update ForestPack, this gets completely wiped out, which means all your hard work of creating libraries and presets will actually get completely deleted. Highly recommend that you find a space on your computer where you can create your own libraries. So for now, I'm going to create one in the lesson plan. I'm going to right click, say new, save folder, and just for now, click on custom, press enter. Do not go into this folder because we want this folder to be the root folder here. So click on custom, click select folder, and there it is right over there, which is awesome. Don't forget to click the OK button, and as I do that, you'll see straight away I now have a folder right over there called custom. Now it's important to know that the folders that appear underneath libraries, so in this instance it's custom, the only way to create additional folders here is to actually create them inside Windows Explorer. Subfolders and libraries can be created in the library browser. For example, underneath custom, right click, create folder. You can see there's my subfolder. I can then also create a library. You'll notice that the icon is green, which means it is a custom library, which means we can edit that. But as mentioned before, I cannot right click here and create a folder. What you can do is you can create it in the actual Windows Explorer. So if I navigate to my Windows Explorer, which is right over here, I can right click again, say new, save folder, and say custom to press enter. Again, what's going to happen is I'm going to click refresh and nothing's going to happen. And that is because you have to go back into the preferences and tell ForestPack where to look. So if I click on the add and I click on custom to, then I click select folder, then click OK, it will appear there. And very strict rules. You cannot rename it in the library browser, and in fact you actually cannot delete it here. If I click delete and say yes, it's still there. If I click refresh, it's still there, still there, still there. So the way to do that is, again, in preferences, you need to come in here and you need to delete it in the actual preferences, clicking the OK button, and then it's gone. Okay, so just remember there are a couple of rules that you need to follow. So now we know how to create folders in the libraries layout. We know how to create subfolders, and we know how to create a library. It's time to actually populate the library. The first thing that I like to do when we are creating a new library is right click, say open in shell, and this will take you straight to the actual location where you've saved on your hard drive. We already have a thumbnails. This is a folder that automatically gets created when you create a new library, and we have an index XML file. This stores all of the data of the actual library. The first thing I do is create a new folder. Let's call this objects. Let's create another folder called maps. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to populate all of the maps that belong to all of the models. So the maps gets the maps, the objects gets all of the max files, and the thumbnails will get all of the thumbnails. So what I've done is I've gone ahead and populated it with some models. Now this can be models that you've bought, models that you've created yourself, as long as you've put all the maps inside here, or the max files inside here, and all the thumbnails inside there. So you can see that I've got maps, I've got the max files, and I've got the thumbnails. So this is an Evermotion collection that I'm using as an example. What we now need to do is go back into the new library, and now we need to create the actual models. So we're going to right click, we're going to say create item. You can create a billboard or you can create a 3D object. In this instance we will create a 3D object, and that creates an empty placeholder for us. What we now need to do is right click and say properties. This is where we fill all the information we want. If you know the scientific name or the letter name, you can do that. I know that mine is Glyceria maxima. I know the common name is Great Manna. You can fill in a family name, you can give it a description. The 3D model section, now this is where we are going to tell ForestPack what model to use. The object is in the event that your max file has multiple objects inside. For example, let's go to max file, and in my objects tab I'm going to select the very first one, and as I click on the open tab, it now is going to load that max file. If I go in the objects tab, you'll see that there's only one item inside here, which is fine. I'm going to say click OK. Over here I can select the thumbnail. So if I select that item, go to the folder, select the thumbnail that I want, click the open button, and then if you do want to override the material, otherwise leave it as standard, click the OK button. And now we have our very first item that we've actually imported and created from scratch. If we right click, we can go back to properties and you can manipulate in anything that you want over here. If we right click again, we can say use item. So what I can do is, if we just minimize this a little bit over here, what we can do is grab our plane. We go to forest pack, make sure it's generated. I'm just going to click on it. Now this forest pack has been created on the plane, but it's empty. If I click on Great Manor, right click, say use item, say yes, you'll see that it's actually populated straight away using the item that we created, which is awesome. Let's go back into the browser. What happens if there are multiple items in the max file? Right click, create item, 3D object, right click, properties. For now we'll skip all the names. Let's go straight to the max file and click open. Let us locate the actual max file that we want to open. Click the open button. Then underneath object, if we click on there, we'll see that there are two items here that we can use. Select the one that you want to use, click the OK button, and then again the thumbnail, and then click OK. Now we've got those two items there. So that's one way of adding things. Another way would be simply to right click. We can go import objects from scene. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to close this. Always making sure that you save changes to whatever changes you've done. Let's go into the scene that I've prepared. I've got 3 objects over here that I would like to add to my actual collection. So with these objects selected, really important to do that, the library browser button, let's activate it, right click, import objects from scene. With those 3 objects selected, I'm going to click this button. It's now going to ask me import the selected objects from scene to the library. So create 3ds Max scene. Standard settings are good. Click the import button, give it a couple of seconds, and then it's going to tell you objects were imported successfully, and it tells you what it's done. Click the OK button, and now we have 1, 2, and 3 objects. Really awesome, because it's also taken basically a screenshot of each one for you. So let's go to the first one, grass 1. Right click, save properties. Now this is again where you can come and change anything that you want. You've got the thumbnail that it's taken, you've got grass scientific name, the common name family description, the max file that it came from, as well as the object. So all of these are working perfectly. Now the override material is coming from the material library, and it's material 85. So it's used whatever material was used into the scene. Let's click cancel there. Next on our list is we can right click and say import objects from a 3ds Max file. It is the same as just simply coming to create item and create 3D object. So let's go import object from 3D Max file, click that button. Let's select our folder, and then remember to select the folder that has the Max files in it. In my instance, it's this one here that's called objects. I'm going to say select folder, and then it's going to pick up all of the Max files that are in there. I can choose the Max file that I want. And then once I've done that, it's actually showing me all the objects that are inside that Max file, which again is really handy. So we can select the one that we want, select the object we want, and then click the import button. Then once that's imported, we can right click, go to properties, and change anything that we want over here. Let's close that. Right click one more time, we've got import billboards, which is the same as importing an object from the scene. So now that we understand how to create a folder, subfolders, how to edit, rename, and also add a new library, these are all individual items. What about actually creating a preset for yourself? So that's what we're going to do next. So let's close this tab and let's start off with this forest pack item. So what I'm going to do is I want to show you a couple of tricks. Number one is the original presets that come with forest pack. We can actually use some of these models in our own presets that we want to create. So we can take a combination of things. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose Common Grass 01. I'm going to say the load selected button. So what it's doing is, as we've learned, it's loaded the scatter here. And if you remember, we actually get a forest templates frozen layer here. This layer is the models that are being used to actually scatter. So what we can do is let's hide everything except this forest template. What I'm going to do is I'm going to right click and say unhide all, say yes. Now we have access to the actual 3D model that was being used to actually create that scatter. what I am going to do is I'm going to create a brand new folder over here, and I'm just going to call this models. What I'm going to do is I'm going to place this item inside my models folder, and I'm just going to move it aside because I want to use that model now. Let's unhide the forest pack item. I'm going to go back into the forest pack item. Let's go into the library, and I actually want to use some of these daisies. I'm going to select the daisy, load selected, say yes, and now we're going to do the exact same process. So underneath the layers tab, let's hide everything except the frozen items. Right click, unfreeze all, say yes. I want this model, and let's grab this model over there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move them aside, place them in the models folder. This is just for organization. Then let's unhide everything again. Go into the forest pack. Let's choose one more. So underneath library, let's go to layered lawns, and let's pick unkept lawn. Load selected, say yes, and you can do this with any of the presets. Wait for that to load, and the same process begins. Let's go to scene layer, hide everything except the forest template. Right click, unfreeze all, say yes. Pick the models you want. So for me, I'm going to select this one, that one, and let's take one of those. Move it all the way aside. Again, just to be organized, place it in the models folder. And then what we can do is go back into the forest pack preset, and let's actually delete it, and we can start from scratch. Now these models here we don't need anymore, so we can delete those. So what we have now are a couple of models that forest pack came with, and we have a couple of our own models that we've imported from other sources. So now all of these models over here, all we need to do now is actually create a forest pack scattering item. We can use all of the knowledge that we have learned from transform, display. We can use different probabilities, and we can create something really, really beautiful. Now I've gone ahead and actually created one already, which is this one right over here. So let me show you the models that I've used. I grabbed a couple of ones from the presets, and I grabbed a couple of my own personal favorites from other collections. What I've done is I've gone into the forest pack, and let me show you what I've done. I've added all of them in. I've changed the probabilities, I've changed the scale, I've gone ahead underneath the transform tab, I've manipulated that, I've gone underneath the distribution, so I've gone ahead and played with all of my settings, and I've created a preset for myself. So now what you need to do now is you actually need to call this preset by name. Now it's really, really important. So I've called it custom preset example, and I have this max file saved. So now what I can do is I can go into my library, and I'm actually going to create a brand new library for myself. So underneath custom, we can right click, say create library. Let's rename this library to presets, press enter, right click. Now we're going to import from the scene. So we can either import from the scene, or we can import from a 3D Max file. I'm going to say import from 3ds Max file because I saved that Max file on its own. So clicking this button, let's do the same process that we just learned. Let's select folder, select the folder that I have created the Max file in, say select folder, and there it is there, custom preset.max. List the objects, and now you can see all the objects that are inside that Max file. Remember that I labeled the actual preset, and that is it right there. So custom preset example, that's what I saved it as. I'm going to import that. And once it's imported, all I need to do is obviously just change all of the settings. So let's go to properties. Again, custom preset, we can leave that it is. We know the max file and the object file. We can select a thumbnail, which I have already rendered one out. So open that up, click preset, click the open button, click the OK button. Let's save that. And now we have a custom preset that I've created my very own thumbnail for. Now this preset can obviously be used basically anywhere that I want. Now one more little tip that I'd like to end off the lesson. The forest library presets that we get with the forest pack program. What we can do is we can actually use some of these and then edit them, because as I mentioned earlier, if it's green, it's a custom library, which means we can edit that. If it is in blue, then we cannot edit that actual library. But what we can do is as follows. Just for now, underneath presets, what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the lawns, and I'm going to hold in the control key, click and drag into the presets. It's going to ask me, are you sure you want to clone it? I'm going to say yes. Now underneath my actual custom folder, I've got a lawns preset. Now this launch preset is identical to this one over here, except it is green, which means when I click on the item and go right click, I can change certain features such as the properties. And at the same time, what I can do is I can actually open up, let's say, this collection over here. I can delete, edit, or manipulate the actual models and then resave it, making sure that it is suited for my needs. So you can definitely play around with the built-in presets as long as you just make a copy of it. And that's it for this lesson.